The thunderous roar of artillery fire echoes through the Vietnamese countryside. Australian Army advisor Major Peter Badco races across more than 600 yards of open ground as fast as his short, stocky legs can carry him, living up to his nickname of the Galloping Major as he bounds towards an American comrade lying wounded and helplessly exposed to enemy fire. Behind thick, horn-rimmed spectacles, the unlikely hero's eyes gleam with determination as he dodges incoming rounds. Nearing the fallen soldier, Badco quickly assesses the situation. Enemy machine gun fire has pinned down a nearby platoon, leaving them unable to mount a rescue. Time is running out. Gathering the platoon, he prepares to lead them in a daring frontal assault on the enemy position. He readies his weapon. The odds are stacked against them, but he'd be damned if he is going to leave a man behind. Peter Badco was born on January 11, 1934, in Adelaide, South Australia. Leaving school at the age of 15, he followed in his father's footsteps by becoming a clerk with the South Australian Public Service. However, he quickly grew bored with office life. Having been obsessed with soldiers and warfare from a young age, he begged his father to be allowed to join the military. After he was reluctantly given permission, Badco enlisted in the Australian Regular Army on June 10, 1950. Badco was a far cry from the stereotypical soldier. He was below average height, somewhat thick-set, and wore horn-rimmed glasses. At first, the other recruits likely saw him as something of a misfit. He was quiet and gentle, didn't drink or smoke, and rarely joined in with recreational activities, instead preferring to spend his time alone, reading books about military history. However, he soon impressed both peers and superiors alike with his vast knowledge of military matters and exuberant enthusiasm for training exercises. His natural aptitude as a soldier quickly became apparent. Having demonstrated clear leadership potential, in 1952 he was admitted to Officer Cadet School. Upon graduation, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Royal Australian Artillery before steadily rising his way up through the ranks. By 1961, he was a battery captain with the 103rd Field Battery, heading off to the jungles of Malaya for his first taste of life in a conflict zone. By the time Badco arrived in Southeast Asia, the guerrilla war known as the Malayan Emergency had already been officially over for a year, but tensions in the region remained high. In nearby Vietnam, another conflict was quickly escalating, and the ever-keen Badco was eager to get a piece of the action. His chance would come in November 1962, when he was detached from his unit in Malaya for a week-long observation tour in South Vietnam. Unsurprisingly, Badco wasn't content with being a mere onlooker. He actively sought out battlefield experience. Attached to a battalion from the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, or ARVN, he spent 5 days in Quang Nguai province with South Vietnamese soldiers for anti-communist operations, during which the unit engaged in several skirmishes with the enemy. Badco was beyond excited to finally be in a real combat situation. Hungry for further frontline encounters, he used his initiative to squeeze even more out of his short trip. When an aircraft engine breakdown delayed his return to Malaya, he seized the chance to join a heliborne operation with the 7th ARVN Division in the Mekong Delta. This week-long exposure to the conflict in Vietnam left an indelible mark on Badco. He was deeply impressed by the role of the U.S. Army advisors in training and leading the South Vietnamese troops, igniting a desire in him to return to Vietnam in a similar capacity. Upon returning to Australia, Badco began setting the wheels in motion to realize this new ambition. In August 1965, he transferred from the artillery to the Royal Australian Infantry Corps and began taking specialized advisor courses and undergoing rigorous jungle warfare training. His dedication paid off. In June 1966, Badco was promoted to Provisional Major. 2 months later, Badco began his service in South Vietnam, joining the ranks of the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam, or AATTV. This elite unit, nicknamed the Team, was tasked with preparing and advising South Vietnamese government forces in the war against the North Vietnamese Army and their Viet Cong guerrilla allies. In the 4 years since Badco's previous visit to the country, the conflict had evolved considerably. The United States was now fully engaged in combat, with large-scale ground troop deployments, widespread bombing campaigns, and intensified combat operations. With the opposing forces stepping up their efforts in kind, Badco had his work cut out for him as an advisor. Badco's first assignment placed him in Tua Tien province, where he served as sub-sector advisor for the Nam Hoa district. In this role, he was responsible for working with two elements of the South Vietnamese Territorial Forces, the Regional Force, or RF, and the Popular Force, or PF. Collectively referred to by the Americans and Australians as the Rough Puffs, these local militia units were under the control of the provincial chief and played an important role in maintaining security at the district level. Badco's duties were diverse and demanding, ranging from accompanying Rough and Puff units on operations to providing on-the-job training and overseeing hamlet security. He also served as a liaison with ARVN troops operating in the area. From the outset, Badco threw himself into this work with characteristic zeal. Fellow AATTV advisor Major Ian McNeil noted, quote, "Enthusiasm, courage, and audacity were Badco's hallmarks, and those around him were often infected by his optimism." Always at the forefront of operations, he was easily identifiable by the maroon paratrooper beret he wore. This visible presence, combined with his relentless energy, earned him a new nickname from his American allies, the Galloping Major. Badco also attracted attention for his fearless approach to combat. Another AATTV officer, Captain Barry Rissell, described him as, quote, "a veritable tiger." On one occasion, during a clearing operation with an RF company, they were attacked by Viet Cong fighters hiding in a tree line. Despite their attempts to advance, the company was pinned down by fire from a bunker. With the situation growing desperate, the company commander was about to resort to calling in an airstrike. But Badco had a better idea. Taking matters into his own hands, he grabbed 2 jerry cans of petrol from a nearby jeep and started circling around the bunker, approaching from outside its arc of fire. In full view of the enemy, he doused the bunker with petrol and set it ablaze with a white phosphorus grenade, destroying the Viet Cong position and allowing the company to move ahead. Despite his reputation on the battlefield, Badco was by no means a one-dimensional soldier. He developed a deep respect and affection for the Vietnamese people and their culture. This genuine interest made him particularly effective in his advisory role. Regularly going above and beyond to support the local forces he worked with, he would provide U.S. Marines with alcohol and souvenirs from the AATTV's canteen in exchange for much-needed equipment for his RF units. His compassion extended beyond his military duties. He also donated food and supplies to a local orphanage. However, Badco's empathy for the Vietnamese people also exposed him to the harsh realities of the war. In February 1967, an ARVN regiment he was accompanying ordered a napalm strike on a village occupied by the Viet Cong, despite the population being strongly supportive of the government. Badco and other advisors tried to prevent the use of napalm, but were overruled by ARVN divisional headquarters. The results were devastating, with 40 civilian casualties. Badco spent the next day and a half arranging for the removal of bodies and finding new accommodation for the survivors. This incident marked a turning point for him. While he remained committed to his duty, he began to develop a more cynical view of the war's conduct. Nevertheless, his dedication to his men and his mission never wavered. Later that month, on February 23rd, Major Peter Badco and his American deputy, Captain James Custer, were overseeing a regional force company operation in the Pho To district when, about 650 yards away, a Popular Force platoon found itself caught in an ambush. As sporadic rifle fire crackled in the distance, Custer's radio crackled with grim news. 2 American advisors, Captain Clement and Sergeant Thomas, were down. Immediately, Badco sprang into action, sprinting across the fire-swept terrain toward the beleaguered platoon. Badco's tactical mind quickly pieced together the dire situation. Captain Clement lay motionless 150 yards ahead, slain while aiding a wounded Vietnamese soldier. Sergeant Thomas had attempted to rescue his superior, but he too was caught by fire and was now sprawled in the open between Clement and the retreating platoon. Surveying the battlefield, Badco's eyes narrowed. The enemy, roughly company strength, had entrenched themselves along a small rise, poised for a devastating assault. Time was running out. In a display of extraordinary leadership, Badco rallied the shaken Popular Force platoon. His voice cutting through the din of battle, he outlined a daring plan, a frontal assault on the enemy position. With Badco at the forefront, a reinvigorated platoon surged forward. Automatic weapons fire lashed out at the advancing force. Badco, his weapon at the ready, zigzagged through the maelstrom. Spotting a menacing machine gun nest, he charged headlong toward it. His rifle barked, and the enemy gunners fell silent. Under Badco's fearless guidance, the platoon pressed on, exacting a heavy toll on the surprised enemy forces. As the tide of battle turned, Badco's focus shifted to the fallen Americans. With bullets still whizzing overhead, Badco returned to Captain Clement. Gently lifting his comrade's lifeless body, he carried him to safety, honoring a soldier's duty to leave no man behind. Returning once more into the fray, he helped extract the wounded Sergeant Thomas, ensuring his safe evacuation. Thanks to Badco's bravery and initiative, the pro-government forces were able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Less than 2 weeks later, on March 7th, Badco was part of a reaction force responding to an attack by 2 Viet Cong battalions on the district headquarters at Quang Dien. The enemy force greatly outnumbered the defenders, and defeat seemed certain. As Badco's group approached the battle, their vehicle veered off the road into a ditch. His deputy didn't survive the accident, but Badco, undeterred, pressed on. Reaching the scene, he found the South Vietnamese forces in disarray, on the verge of being overrun. Just as he had done in Pho To, Badco took command. He quickly organized the scattered troops into platoons and led them in a flanking maneuver against the main Viet Cong force. Then, he formed the men into an extended line and personally led them in an assault across open ground against the enemy. Once again, Badco's decisive leadership and personal courage had turned the tide of the battle. In the face of this unexpected counterattack, the Viet Cong withdrew in disarray. The district headquarters, and likely many lives, were saved largely due to Badco's actions. However, while his heroic exploits on the battlefield mounted, Badco was quickly growing disillusioned with the war. Exactly 1 month later, on April 7, 1967, Badco wrote a letter to his wife and children, saying, quote, "It's time I came home. I'm getting bitter and cynical. I can see more and more good about the Vietnamese and less about the U.S. advisors." Despite his changing outlook, Badco's sense of duty did not diminish. Later that day, he learned that the 1st ARVN Division Reaction Company was in trouble near the hamlet of An Thuan in the Vuong Tra district. The ARVN force, along with a squadron of armored personnel carriers, had encountered a well-entrenched Viet Cong force of about 2 companies. The South Vietnamese troops had suffered heavy casualties and were pinned down by intense enemy fire. Badco, who was serving as the sector headquarters duty officer at the time, knew that without advisors present, the ARVN force would be denied crucial air support. Without hesitation, he grabbed his weapons and equipment, and along with his American deputy, Sergeant Alberto Alvarado, raced to the scene in a jeep. Upon arrival, Badco found the situation even more desperate than he had imagined. The ARVN troops had fallen back to a cemetery for cover, leaving Badco and Alvarado exposed, about 50 yards in front of the leading elements. Despite the danger, Badco sprinted back to the ARVN troops, moving among them, encouraging them, and rallying them to move forward again. He then courageously set out in front of the company to lead the assault personally. As Badco advanced, enemy fire intensified. The ARVN troops, still shaken, stopped their advance, but Badco pressed on, alone. He made it to a position of cover and prepared to hurl grenades at the enemy. As he rose to throw, Alvarado pulled him down as heavy small arms fire swept over their position. Undeterred, Badco rose again, determined to break the enemy's resistance. But as he stood to throw another grenade, he was caught by a burst of machine gun fire, slaying him instantly. The galloping major's final charge had come to an abrupt, tragic end. Despite being wounded himself, Alvarado called in artillery support. Soon after, the position was assaulted and captured by the reinvigorated ARVN forces. Badco's last act of courage inspired the South Vietnamese troops to overcome their fear and achieve victory. The loss of Badco sent shockwaves through Vietnam. His bravery and leadership had earned him immense respect from both his South Vietnamese and American allies. The memorial service held for him in Hue was the largest that had been seen for any Allied soldier up to that point. On October 17, 1967, Badcoe was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest medal in the British and Commonwealth system, as well as the United States Silver Star and various South Vietnamese medals, including being made a Knight of the National Order of Vietnam. In addition, he was awarded 3 crosses for gallantry and the Armed Forces Honor Medal First Class. All his medals are now displayed permanently at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. While Badcoe's legacy lives on through various honors and memorials, the man himself was buried at Terendak Garrison Cemetery in Malaysia. His headstone bears the simple yet poignant inscription, quote, "He lived and died a soldier."